All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Saturday. Thanks for checking out the chat. If there's anybody here yet, I'm a little late getting the coffee started, so I'm behind the power curve as well. But I haven't got my screen set up yet, so give me a minute. I get some stuff pulled up here in some order out of the chaos. Hope everybody back east isn't flooded out. That could always delay people. But let me find some things, get the screen organized before I share a little bit. So do not panic. No technical difficulties yet. All right. It does look like there's quite a bit of weather still out there in the east. It's re-attacking in the Midwest. Let's start off with that, I guess, while I get some other research stuff done. All right, there you go. Mostly in the Midwest again. Moved off the coast, stuff we had going this week. Who's in here? Nobody? Nobody gonna comment? Nobody's gonna fess up to it? All right. We'll hang out for a minute and wait. Oh, we got 01 Crom with us this morning. How you doing? I just seen a little bit of lag pop across the screen, so not sure how the feed's going to pick back up here. Google can be frustrating. It's like you start out 5x5 and it goes downhill from there. Crom, it's that cold, 8 degrees. Yeah, they're showing snow over Montana there. That could be you. 56 yesterday. Wait 5 minutes, the weather will change, right? Alicia Clegg's with us. Good morning. If you're getting the same weather we are, it's probably going to be 75 or something. It'll be hot today. I might take the top down on the Jeep. And Walter Davis is with us. Good morning. So there's a brief snapshot of the weather overall. Has my... You want to do yard work. You're a freak. Who wants to do yard work? I don't really have a yard, so I don't have to worry about it. I just got too many animal works to worry about. It all balances out. But we don't like to linger on the weather too much on the weekend, as long as you know if you can get outside this weekend or not. Looks like Michigan in the Midwest is still going to go through some winter today. I got to do some fence building. That's what I got to do. Does everybody have their coffee? Is everybody ready? We do have a sign of the apocalypse from this week. And Crom can't get out the door because it's frozen shut. That's no good. No bueno, right? Good morning, Tommy boy. Are you a individual who sorts by, you've got it all lined up in different containers, sorted by brand down to the last down to the last caliber? I've never found it to be that big of a deal on handgun brass, but rifle brass, it seems like, has to be sorted down to the last. Every single version has to be sorted out separate because it doesn't. They all have their own tweak on the press. Handgun ammo just flies through, no problem. All right, speaking of brass, we'll start off with that this morning. They've been talking about the tax on ammo and stuff we've all been hearing about. So this was from Monday. And it really is surprising how not a whole lot of stories were on this from this week. They were mostly from 2 or 3 weeks ago, but we kind of heard more about it last week. It seemed like the ammo tax, the ammo ban. So Wasserman Schultz had been leading this charge, as we had heard. She got up there talking about this. So she announced legislation to close what she called a dangerous loophole. Hush. So she explained that federal law bans the sale of both guns and ammo to criminals, domestic abusers, and dangerously mental ill, but the law mandates no background check for buying bullets. Oh, goodness. Does federal law prevent buying ammo by felons? I wouldn't doubt it, but my goodness, how hard is that to track? It's just like any law. It's impossible to enforce when nobody's actually harming anybody else. So she's pushing for background checks on that end from Florida. And as the gun store owner here at the bottom of this article says, it's a feel-good measure. So they interviewed a Guns and Range Training Center in West Palm Beach store owner, Alex Shikup, if I say that right. Talking about this means is almost counterproductive because we're not talking about the cause. He called the proposed legislation another feel-good measure which avoids seriously addressing gun violence. He said requiring background checks for ammunition sales would increase his workload and possibly tax the system of conducting background checks, which is all entirely true. Far more ammo is purchased in an individual purchase than any firearms purchase. Of course, the store owner is going to blow it for the rest of us. The store owner also pointed out that a lot of people make their own ammo. Oh, thanks, bud. Thanks for throwing us under the bus. Passage of legislation is considered a long shot. So requiring background checks, because apparently federal law says you can't possess or buy ammo if you're a felon. I didn't know that. But can they get rid of her in Florida? Where's Angel at? Is Angel in the chat? We need to have a word. He has got to ditch Debbie. I know it's his girlfriend and all, but come on. Hey, let's go back out in the side chat. Boneyard's with us. Good morning. Tommy boy, I'm assuming you're talking about Debbie should be in jail. Who else would be talking about? Yes, indeed. Jet M, good morning from the high desert. If you, Walter says, if you are a gallon and have a few bullets and get caught, if you're a felon, okay, it looks like some autocorrect kicked in there. You're charged and getting locked up. I see. How else will they keep us in check? They passed the bump stock BS and they wanted them turned in or destroyed. Sorry. Yeah, Tommy boy, I don't think anybody has been turning in bump stocks in those places that have said turn them in. Denver was the biggest example of that. And spray and pray is a waste of ammo anyway. Indeed, but I have always made the one exception that a bump stock could be very useful and effective when the Chinese hordes come over the border. That's when one of those times we're getting out the mass fire into the wall, just hold it steady would be very effective. So I can see the usefulness of it in certain instances, just like any automatic weapon. Andy's Journeys, good morning from Chattanooga. All right, right on. Good morning. You and Tommy boy can go hook up. Who would turn it in, Alicia? That's a good question. The same people that are turning in their rifles, I guess. All these feel-good people, although those people probably haven't devolved to getting a bump stock yet. But we've had quite a few of those show pieces, show ponies, for lack of a better word, I guess, that showed themselves turning in their rifles to police on social media over the last month or so. But as we know, all taxes are really just clamors to get more money for the state to fund some pet project is usually the motive. They usually don't really care about actually using the tax to decrease anything like smoking, etc. That's all about the revenue. So there's a good story we got here. This is out of Seattle. So Seattle had a gun tax revenue that is spiraling downward from forecast expectations. So they expected they could just tax things and they would get revenue from it. You know, everybody's happy, right? They just suck more money out of the people's pocket and they get to pay for more stupid stuff. But in Seattle, they had enacted a gun and ammo tax that they had hoped would fund some things probably. Let's see what the details say. It's a 2015 measure which placed a $25 assessment on each modern firearm and up to 5 cents on each round of ammunition. Holy cow. was billed as Seattle's solution to the $17 million medical costs from gunshot victims. Oh my goodness. As the city underwrote the Harborview Medical Center in 2014. Oh, that was a 5 cents a round. Holy cow. However, as disclosed by figures released by the city under a Public Records Act requested by gunmag.com, the amount collected totaled $93,220 in 17, was far less than the $300,000 to $500,000 annual windfall projected by the city council 3 years ago. So less than a third of what they expected. Just want to laugh. Can somebody laugh really, really loud for me? Because I don't want to, break anybody's eardrums out there. That's hilarious. Oh, goodness. Where's Barry? Is Barry still in the chat? Barry, aren't you glad that you are not in Seattle? Most people I know laugh at Seattle regularly that are up there. Several friends that live up in the area. So their pie-in-the-sky gun tax revenue forecast have been proven to be a complete failure, essentially like other gun control fantasies. So the Second Amendment Foundation founder, Alan Gottlieb, stated, "The revenue data only reinforces our claim in a lawsuit against the tax, that this was a gun control scheme to drive firearm sales and gun stores out of the city," which it obviously did. But did crime go down? They don't even get into this, I don't think, here. That would be the next shoe to drop. Like, really, what's the city's crime looking like? Some firearms retailers are quick to agree with Gottlieb's assessment. Precise Shooter, a former Seattle gun shop that relocated to Linwood nearby, because all you gotta do is step across the city limits. It's kind of like that soda tax they had up in Seattle. We did this story last month, where they imposed a soda tax. People were just driving, like, literally right on the border, where some places in another jurisdiction, to buy their soda, and it's a huge windfall for those stores. But they imposed that soda tax of like ridiculous $5 or whatever, just for a 2-liter. So the gun store owner argues the city went so far as to draw a net loss from the tax as shops moved from the city and in the process took their robust sales tax revenues with them. So that may have been the large reason they were a third less than expected. Everybody left. Not just nobody bought, there was nobody to buy from. So they draw a net loss from the tax as shops move from the city, and in the process, the store said they sold over 1,200 guns last year to Seattle residents who visited their location, and that sales tax remained outside the Emerald City. Once again, you got to laugh at them. Same thing that happens in California. All these ridiculous regulations they put on stuff. People just they can't necessarily go to other states in large respect, but such as it goes. So the store staff pointed out, well, we don't know how much of the revenues city lost at other gun stores, but we have transferred $63,715 in taxes to Linwood in 2017, the store staff pointed out. If we did not have to move, this money would have gone to the city of Seattle. But the key here is when they push it further and further out, it's the incrementalism is the thing you got to watch out for. Is that, well, first it's Seattle, then it's the whole county of whatever it is up there. I can't remember. And then it goes to all the western Seattle County or Washington counties of the same policies. So they move further out. They all move across the Cascades, and let's just secede and get it over with. What would they call that? The readout that Hibernia's son always talks about. That's almost like a feel-good story of the day. Gun shop owners getting over on the man. See how we're doing out here in the side chat. Boneyard says the Pacific Northwest is poached. You think so, huh? Cali will welcome them with open arms, says Crom. Oh, you guys moved a whole. Never mind, I didn't back up for enough. Jet M is worried about Russia. Russia. Jet M, I would not too seriously worry about Russia. We talked about quite a bit this week with the whole ejection of foreign diplomats from all these Western countries. Then we looked a little further into it, and EU and Russia just signed a agreement to build an oil and gas pipeline from Russia into EU to distribute oil and gas throughout Europe. So it's like money talks. It's like all this other stuff is just a show stage. It doesn't seem quite as legitimate as previously, I guess I would say, reading that. Talking about some gardening. Tommy Boy says they will hide the troops in cargo containers and release them on us with their cargo ships. Interesting theory. Cargo containers. Oh no, let's don't get Red Dawn too far on us. Walter Davis changing to battle rattle on once they get on airliners dressed as civilians. Oh, you guys are off the wall. All right, Alicia, have a good walk. A productive day will be probably out of reach for most of us. Just the way it is. You get like half the things accomplished you wanted to. Yes, Boneyard, we all love freedom and liberty. It's always something we can agree on. So there's some of the gun grabber agenda from the week we wanted to touch on, and from previous weeks, as a matter. I haven't really discussed this during the weekday chats because it takes up so much time. I mean, we've already covered the first half hour here. And plus, I wanted to laugh a lot at Seattle there. That is quite funny. Try to get taxes, and the man gets it stuck to him. But now, unfortunately, Seattle has promised all that tax revenue to this healthcare facility they're underwriting, and there's probably going to be some shortages there. So healthcare suffers because the government's involved, etc. Whatever else they plan to put that money. So it's a big government boondoggle as usual when they don't know what they're doing because they're not focused on freedom and liberty, like you said, Boneyard. They're focused on other things like their pockets, their power, their control over things instead of just people's freedom. So in the continuing struggle in California and sanctuary states and cities, et cetera, that's been going on all week. We discussed that in a couple of mornings, those situations. That's always a good quote, right, Crom? You want to be you be like Genghis Khan rolling out through the high plains up there. So this is current. Governor has pardoned 5 men facing deportation from yesterday afternoon, evening. So Jerry Brown on Friday pardoned 5 ex-convicts facing deportation, including 2 whose families fled the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia 4 decades ago. I don't know what that has to do with it. I mean, their families had a tough time and fled Cambodia, and just because they're related to them, they get a pass. I don't. They're trying to make it feel good story there instead of sticking to the issue. The pardons don't automatically stop deportation, but eliminate the state convictions federal authorities base their deportation decisions on. That gives strong legal arguments before immigration judges try to prevent the deportations. So they're not illegals. They're just convicts that were immigrants. Am I reading that right? So it's a little bit different than the illegal sanctuary issue, but just Governor Brown probably going out of his way to try to avoid any deportations of anybody. Brown intervened for the men among 56 pardoned. It's the Democratic governor's third consecutive pardon round in which he intervened on behalf of immigrants who were deported or faced deportation because of criminal convictions. So he's just broad-based, hey, you get a pardon because you might get deported. That's a good way to govern. Whack-ball, Jerry. What is California? I feel sorry for you in Seattle now. We got our second laugh of the day. We can laugh at Seattle and California. I laugh at California just about every day, though. No offense, Sparks, if you're watching. I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. So Governor Brown last year signed his sanctuary legislation, which we know about. So these two gentlemen pardoned Soka Chan, Fan Fetch. I can't believe that's a real name. It doesn't. I mean, I've seen Cambodian names. That doesn't even look Cambodian. They were convicted on 2 counts of misdemeanor domestic violence in 2002 and served 364 days in jail. That was Chan. Pretch was convicted of possessing drugs and obstructing a police officer in 2005 and served 6 months in jail. His wife said he is in federal custody. So I'm not tracking why they were getting deported now. And they don't ever mention if they're illegal immigrants or if they just have a green card status. Because once you break your terms of your green card, you get deported too. But dang, 13 years later, seriously? Like, what's the point? Also pardoned was Daniel Maher, who was convicted in 1995 kidnapping, robbery, and being a felon in possession of a firearm. And should not be pardoned. He is facing deportation to China. Get him out. They both hold permanent U.S. residency, but had exhausted all legal avenues to fight deportation, making Brown's pardons for them the last. So they'd been fighting for 10 plus years, fighting deportation because they probably started deportation proceedings as a part of their status as residents. So they had green card status. Yeah, they have permanent residency, so they don't have citizenship. They have residency. Got it. Okay. So Jerry Brown covering up for felons, kidnapping, and robbery. Yeah, good job, Jerry. You're a good guy. Looking out for California. That's what you're doing. Also pardoned while facing deportation were Daniel Mena, Francisco Acevedo Alanes, but their home countries are not immediately known. Mena was convicted in 2003 of possessing illegal drugs. Alanes served 5 months in prison in 1997 for an auto theft conviction. The baffling thing is these people have been fighting these deportation orders for 15 years and still haven't been deported, 15 years plus, and they're just not getting around to doing it. Like, it's so, what's the word? And now the federal government's fought all this time, all this money in court to get these guys deported. And then Jerry Brown steps in with this last minute feel good measure to pardon their sentences, basically erasing them. And the feds have no ground to stand on. Their whole case just crumbled. And now these lawyers, if you want to call them that, go into court and say, hey, they were never convicted of anything. They've been pardoned. You got to let them go. The basis of your whole case just fell apart. California's longest serving governor has now issued 1,519 pardons, including 404 during his first 2 terms. Yet California is a 2-time loser. governor's first two terms were from 75 to 83. And you screwed up and reelected him again in the 21st century. Don't learn nothing. All to stick it in the eye of the feds, it appears, not have anything to do with the basis of the case. Although the one Cambodian gentleman didn't, I mean, he possessed drugs and obstructed a police officer. No big deal. I mean, okay. He may have had a clean record otherwise. Maybe that was, but the other dude, kidnapping, robbery, you're done, son. Get out of here. Moonbeam Brown in California, get what it deserves. What you guys talking about out in the side chat? Seattle is one of Cali's move to places. Everybody from Cali moves to Seattle. They bounce back and forth. Yeah. What's up, Solar Savage? Peanut, welcome to the chat. Haven't seen you in a minute. Well, I've seen you in other chats. I don't think you've drifted by one of these lately, but I've seen you out there in G's and stuff. Right on. The fentanyl thing is definitely a big issue, Boneyard, even more so the synthetic dangerous stuff that basically kills you on contact. It's so strong. I think the biggest thing is getting out the word out to people that, hey, you shouldn't be doing this stuff because it's going to kill you. Even though they can't control themselves, apparently. Right, Crom? Yeah, it's a moneymaker, right? Well, that, and they made all their money in Bitcoin, so now they got to find another way to invest their winnings there. All right, so staying on the illegal immigration warfare going on. This came out a couple of days ago. The administration removed a restriction on deporting pregnant women. So a previous policy was within the administrative of the executive branch. I think they had a hold on this at that level. So Trump just removed that restriction that was previously an executive order, and pregnant women do not receive special considerations of being allowing them to be released while their cases wind through immigration court. So essentially, this helps eliminate the whole what do they call that? Anchor baby issue. Helps alleviate a little bit of that, while not completely, obviously. So the administration said Thursday that it ended special considerations to generally release pregnant women charged being here illegally. ICE said it scrapped the policy that took effect in August 2016. So yeah, real like last minute thing by the previous administration. The previous policy was that pregnant women should be released unless they met limited criteria that required them to be held by law, such as criminal histories or if there were extraordinary circumstances. The new policy took effect in December but wasn't announced until Thursday. So they've been doing this anyway. Okay. I don't know why even announce it. Doesn't really matter. Gives no blanket consideration to pregnancy, though the agency says each case will be reviewed individually and women in their third trimester will generally be released. So still have anchor baby issues with those that are in their last of the road. So upending policies created in the final 2 years of the Obama administration. Deportation arrests have spiked more than 40% under Trump's administration. So Associate Director of ICE's Enforcement and Removal Operations. All across our enforcement portfolio, we're no longer exempting any individual from being subject to the law. What a concept. Yada, yada, yada. What does it really mean? Here's a quote from the ACLU. Hush up down here. The ACLU says, what did it pop back up? The new policy further exposes the cruelty of Trump's detention and deportation force by endangering the lives of pregnant immigrant women, said Victoria Lopez, senior staff counsel of the ACLU. So they're definitely going to go to court over this. Some kind of UN human rights issue or something. Officials say it's unclear how many women would be affected by the policy. ICE took 506 pregnant women into custody since the policy took effect in December, and 35 last week. ICE is required by law to hold certain people regardless of pregnancy, including people convicted of crimes listed in the Immigration and Naturalization Act or placed in fast-track removal proceedings when they are arrested crossing the border. Officials say it's unclear how many women who would have been released under the old policy will now be held. So that's that story. Interesting. Have a policy for months before you tell anybody about it. It's kind of funny. Food Forest, how you doing? You guys are comparing drugs and everything else. Taxes and drugs. Right. Freedom's a hard thing to sell to people when you talk about people want to protect other people for their own sake. Good discussion out there, fellas. Let me drop some of these links into the discussion bar. If you missed the first part of the chat, we talked about some ammo taxes and the effects on Seattle imposing taxes, and the gun background check from Debbie Wasserman Schultz was all good. All right. So moving on, this is probably the last subject. We got about 20 minutes left. Something we've been following quite a bit here, or did more so at the end of last year, but this is out of Zero Hedge. And my favorite topic, or not my favorite, one I've been covering on YouTube for a long time, secession. And secession is going mainstream. I would hate to be mainstream. It would not be nearly as much fun as being on the fringe. But that being said, article out of the Mises Institute, which pretty much aligns with my train of thought, I guess you'd say. But he's talking about how this is coming up as a more frequent topic in the media, and goes through some of the issues and stories on secession around the world, not just in America. It's not an American issue as the left tries to paint it continuously as a right-wing racist conspiracy. It seems like that's all whenever you talk about secession, you're a privileged white male racist or whatever, because they try to tie it back to the Confederacy every time, even though they were right. But and on down in recent years, talk of political separatist movements have become more commonplace, but also increasingly discussed as reasonable alternatives to the status quo. As I like to say, you're either going to secede or you're going to die, as far as governmental structure is concerned. What is historically, of course, established states have long sought to portray secession movements as unsavory forms of agitation pushed only by extremists. Hey, that's me, right? This is a really good article. It covers quite a lot of breadth of information here. So I'm going to try to truncate it. You can look at it. It'll be in the description box. In 2014, there was the Scottish secession movement to secede from the United Kingdom, where you had 45% vote for it. And you had the British secession, the Brexit vote to get out of the European Union, or they succeeded in secession in that case in 2016. As they say here, in spite of hysterical scare campaign waged by pro-EU activists. The sky is falling, is what you'll always hear from those that oppose secession. As he mentions here, the usual arguments against secession made in the United States didn't work in Britain, because after it says here where were we to believe that British secessionists were pushing secession so they could impose slavery within their borders, because that's what it's always tied to here, right? And it couldn't be, because it would have been laughed at and generally ignored. Scottish secession was problematic for the global left, and this is similar in California and Catalonia, which I mention here. Movements have often been portrayed by global elites as reactionary, or at least the sort of thing that conservative malcontents would indulge in. But in Scotland, the secession movement was largely a product of the mainstream leftist parties. Yeah, those socialists. In the wake of the Scottish referendum, were we to believe that 45% of Scottish voters were extremist malcontents? And so is in California and Catalonia have also been products of the left. Given the mainstream media's fondness for the left, the effect of this has been to push secession out of the extremist shadows and into the realm of allowable, if eccentric, political discourse. Everything old is new again. So they talk about a Washington Post study talking about secession movements that they link to here. I'll share that link here in a second. And really that these secession movements are proliferating. There have been 630 sovereignty referendums since 1776. In 1990s, there were at least 110. A large part of that was the breakup of the Soviet Union, like especially when you had Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia break up. In 2000, saw 88 sovereignty referendums, many related to the EU. Now, of course, secession is not easy, no doubt. In all these cases, the status quo states fear that secession may lead to advantage for competing states. Of course, just like when we talk about the United States, if we were to break up into a few smaller countries, everybody's worried about China coming in and getting their advantage, and Russia taking over Alaska, and all kinds of fear mongering over the economic implications, and that things will just devolve into third world tribalism or something. I think people would be surprised when it didn't work out that way. And you guys are talking about something completely different. You guys are still stuck on drugs, man. Is it really that intensive of an issue? It's just, can't we just settle that it's about freedom? but it's increasingly accepted that secession and sovereignty referendums are multifaceted in their motivating factors. Well, yeah, just like all of them, there's more to it than just one issue. The Declaration of Independence wasn't just about the Boston Tea Party. You know, it wasn't just about Lexington and Concord. There was more to it. And my favorite argument that I always push, research suggests that secession movements can also help to promote peace. Indeed, either you peacefully secede or there will always be war devolved from that. That's my dissertation as well. So as they quote this, Micah German concluded that self-determination referendums are likely to create a positive dynamic and increase chances for peace. I agree. It is the easiest, most peaceful means to resolve many of our issues, but people would rather fight over it. They are likely to foster perceptions of fair decision-making. They may contribute to a reversal of hostile images. They may lead to referendum-related coalitions that are willing to support their outcome and increase the durability of settlements, perhaps being the most important part of those movements. Of course, states aren't likely to sign off on these referendum unless pressure is applied, whether international, domestic protest, etc. Secessionists have to find some way to make secession the least bad option for a state, or it's going to be, the least painful, which it is fairly painless overall. Spain doesn't think that, obviously, because Catalonia is such a large economic area for them, with all the economic benefit generated. Same with like the EU. Britain had a large economic impact on the EU, so they didn't want it to go. Germany's nervous because Germany supports a large portion of the welfare state in the EU. So the Mediterranean states can't support themselves. At the core of all this, however, again, another key point I like to point out, is the realization that it is morally objectionable and absurd to insist that the current borders of a state are forever sacrosanct, that everyone currently within a certain state must remain forever so. Indeed, if we do not have self-determination, what's the point? If we are continually bound in perpetuity to each other because people 300 years ago said so, there's no allowance for freedom or liberty at all. If you think we're just all going to go die together, in a burning flame, if you don't allow for secession. Mises noted that the only way to protect the rights of minority groups is for them to secede from one state and perhaps join another, as quoted here. And it closes out the article talking about some Mises theories. All right, so that's something to check out, people. Topic close to my heart. People don't give it secession nearly the credence they should. And it is the most peaceful of all options. Just because Lincoln was a warmonger doesn't mean everybody else has to be. So this links over to the Washington Post article from March 27th, and just talking about how Caledonia is just the most recent referendum, and why are they proliferating? So that'll be in the discussion box below as well for your review. People don't like people being able to be self-determining. It scares them. What will they do? Just like everybody, a lot of people are on board, like California, go your own way. You go, please. Yes. Let California be their own country. Succeed or fail on their own. Why do we care? I mean, why would we be so offended by it when we have so little in common with them? And much more so different parts of the country. You see many articles and studies about the U.S., and really we should be broken up into about 5 or 6 different countries. When you look at economics and culture, people like to push this perception of this hegemonious, homogeneous American culture, and it's never been like that, and it's not like that. You know what I'm saying? So sovereignty referendums go way back. Sovereignty referendums are more frequent than you might think. This is in this Washington Post article. So they're having some bullet points. Reasons the trend upward. Maybe tyranny is the reason for the upward trend. They're spreading globally. So there's all the ones in the dots from 1776 to 1945, and in the lower there, 46 to 2017, including Hawaii. There is a sovereignty initiative in Hawaii, if you didn't know. The locals want us out. And then everybody says, well, the Japanese will take over. Yeah, that might be true. They're not always implemented. Some examples are the South Sudan, East Timor, and Montenegro. No end in sight to these referendum. So good stuff there. I like it. Light them up. We'll continue to follow the Catalonian issue, as we had talked about earlier in the week. The leader of the issue had been arrested coming across in the German border, arrested by the EU for charges in Spain, because he's charged with X number of crimes for leading this movement. But they were having large protests in Catalonia earlier in the week. But I haven't seen any follow-up articles on that. So we will continue to touch into there and see what's going on. Because again, the economic impact is going to be large, and something to track how the EU continues its spiral downward, and can spiral downward economically, potentially. Nothing is fixed, but the potential is definitely there. So what are we going to close out with discussing here, folks? You guys are definitely hitting the drug issue pretty hard. If my chat pulls back up or not. Sometimes I just have, it's weird. You come back to the page and it has to refresh before it'll show the side chat. I don't get it. All right, there we go. Crom likes to argue, okay, that's no big deal. That's what it's here for. Hard drug use is another NWO tool. Nothing more, nothing less. Well, anything that just is self-destructive of people, you know, is a bad thing. But the issue is are people harming other people? But Solar Savage, you want to send a link. Something about 9/11. Oh goodness, you're going to go into history, aren't you, Solar? Dang, you're not. Let's see. Can I? Since this is your first time back in the chat, I hadn't. All right, try it now, Solar. You should be able to link in. What's up, Wes? Wes is pretty hardcore against those, not thoughts, those, right? Legal or not. Well, individually, you don't want anybody can take place in self-destructive behavior, but the question is, should the government make it illegal? Shouldn't it be the people helping other people that get people out of that? Because the government's not the solution. Now, we talk about importation. If we want to keep the government, the federal government wants to keep things from being imported into the country, that makes perfect sense to close the borders off to stuff like that, because you don't have any quality control. It is easily subversive, but especially just like building a gun in a state to grow opioids or anything else in a state and sell it in the same state, the federal government had no control really, except for these illegal laws they make about the DEA and the BATFE and everything else. I don't know how we got off the topic of drugs, but I guess that illegal discussion of deportation orders got us started on that. Solar, you should be able to place the link. You should be able to put a link in now, Solar, with your wrench of death there. Solar, you got to put it in. Yeah. Okay, you got to go find it now, Solar. I thought you had it ready to go. Common sense and morality, Wes, can only be determined by the individual, not by the government. Governments never act morally. I think that's one thing to remember. We have a culture problem, and it's definitely an issue, but it's not something the government can solve. Only the people can solve it. Oh, it's a video there, Solar. All right, Solar, put in a video to check out at your leisure. We'll close up with that. That's pretty interesting. Okay, I've followed him before on YouTube, Solar. All right, something for everybody to check out. And we'll wind it up with that. Thanks for coming out, folks. I'm sorry I had to have you all looking at Jerry Brown there at the end. Sorry about that. I didn't even think about that. There is the issue going on in Israel this weekend. A lot of protests, death and destruction being dropped, people charging the border, yada, yada. If you're following the end times and the implications that could lead up to that, check that out. But I will end with have a good weekend, folks. Live free.